The lights in the space station bar were dim and orange. Casting long shadows across the metal tables, Commander Velthori sat hunched over his drink, his forearms wrapped round the glowing cup. His hard-shell body was covered in old battle scars, each one telling a story of fights from long ago. The most recent scars were the deepest, and they all came from one war, the war against the humans. Young soldiers from many different alien races had gathered round his table. They came from across the galaxy, some with scales, others with fur, and a few that looked like walking crystals. All of them had heard whispers about the Terran War, but none had fought in it. They were too young, too eager, and too confident in their own strength. "Tell us about the humans, Commander," said a young Zephyrian female, her blue skin shimmering under the bar lights. "The stories say they are weak, soft flesh, no claws, no armor plating. How did they give the mighty coalition any trouble at all?" Velthori's compound eyes focused on her, then slowly moved across the faces of the other young warriors. He could see the same look in all their eyes, the hungry desire for glory, the certainty that they were superior to any enemy they might face. He had worn that same expression 20 years ago, before he learned what humans were truly capable of. "Weak," he repeated, his voice rough through the translation device. "Yes, that is what we thought too. Their bodies break easily. They cannot survive in space without thick suits. They need to breathe a specific mix of gases, drink water constantly, and eat multiple times per day just to stay alive, by every measure we used. They should have been the weakest species in the galaxy." A young Calvary male with thick grey fur leaned forward. "But they fought the coalition, the entire coalition. How is that possible?" Velthori took a long sip of his drink, feeling a familiar burn as it went down his throat. The taste reminded him of the recycle dead on warships, of long months spent hunting an enemy that refused to be caught. "They had names," he said suddenly. "That should have been our first warning. Most species we conquered barely had individual identities. They were Drone 447 or Worker Group 12. But every human had a name. They used them constantly. Captain Hyanwu of the Earthship Defiant, Lieutenant Sujin of the Mars Defense Force, Engineer Minjun who turned asteroid mining equipment into weapons of war." The young soldiers exchanged glances. This was not the story they expected to hear. "I remember the first battle reports," Velthori continued. "Our scouts observed their military bases, their ships, their weapons. Everything looked primitive. Chemical rockets instead of quantum drives, metal projectiles instead of plasma beams. Their largest warships were smaller than our escort vessels. High Command classified them as a level to civilization, barely worth the fuel it would take to reach their system." "So what went wrong?" asked the Zephyrian. Velthori's mandibles clicked together, a sound his species made when remembering something. "Unpleasant. Everything. The plan was simple. Show overwhelming force, demand surrender, accept their submission, and add their system to the coalition. It had worked on 200 other worlds. It should have worked on Earth." He paused, staring into his drink as if he could see the past reflected in its glowing surface. Admiral Kretik led the first wave. 12 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, and 200 support ships. Enough firepower to crack a planet's surface. The humans had maybe 50 ships total. Most of them converted civilian vessels. The mathematics were simple. "We would win in minutes. But you didn't," said the Calvary. "No, we didn't." Velthori's voice grew quieter. "The humans did something we had never seen before. They didn't try to fight us ship to ship. They didn't form battle lines or attempt to match our firepower. Instead, they scattered like insects, each ship moving independently. Our formation broke apart trying to chase them all." The young soldiers leaned closer, caught up in the story. despite themselves. Then they started singing, Velthari said. Every human ship was broadcasting on open channels, and they were all singing the same song. Our communications specialists tried to decode it, thinking it was some kind of battle coordination system. But it wasn't. It was just music. Something about their home world, their families, their determination to protect what they loved. Music. The Zephyrians sounded confused. They were broadcasting music during a battle, while they were dying. Velthari corrected. Captain Jinho's ship was torn apart by plasma fire, but he kept singing until the very end. Commander Eugene crashed her vessel into our flagship while harmonizing with the others. They faced death with songs on their lips and smiles on their faces. The bar had grown quiet around them. Even the other alien patrons had stopped their conversations to listen to the old warrior's tale. That was when we realized, Velthari said, his voice barely above a whisper, that we were not fighting a normal war. We were fighting something that treated death as just another obstacle to overcome. Something that became stronger when cornered, more dangerous when desperate. He looked up at the young faces surrounding him, seeing his own younger self in their wide eyes and open mouths. The Battle of Luna was just the beginning. Velthari's scarred hands trembled slightly as he refilled his drink. The young soldiers round him waited in silence, their earlier confidence now replaced with uncomfortable curiosity. The old commander's compound eyes reflected the orange lights of the bar as he continued his story. The intelligence reports made it sound so simple. He began, his voice carrying the weight of old regrets. Earth's moon had a small research station called Lunar Base. Maybe 300 humans living there, studying rocks and growing plants in artificial gardens. Our battle computers calculated it would take exactly 14 minutes to capture the entire facility. A young Ashkari soldier with purple scales shifted in his seat. 300 against how many coalition forces? 2,000 elite troops. Velthari replied. The 47th Strike Legion. Veterans of 30 successful campaigns. I was a junior officer then, eager to prove myself in what everyone thought would be an easy victory. We had the best armor, the finest weapons, and centuries of military tradition. Behind us, he paused, taking another sip of his drink. The station commander was a human female named Captain Yoon. She had served in their military for only 12 years, practically a child by our standards, when Admiral Kretak contacted the station to demand surrender. She asked for 10 minutes to consider the terms. Did she surrender? Asked the Zephyrian Veltharius. Mandibles clicked rapidly. She used those 10 minutes to record a message, not to us, but to her family on Earth. She told them she loved them, that she was proud to serve, and that they should remember her with joy, not sadness. Then she sent the message and prepared for battle. The young soldiers exchanged glances. This was not how civilized beings behaved when facing overwhelming odds. Our first landing craft approached the station's main docking bay. Velthari continued. Standard procedure. Secure the entry points. Establish control. Accept the inevitable surrender. But when the airlock opened, we found the docking bay filled with strange metal objects floating in zero gravity. Traps, asked the Kelvari. Improvised weapons, Velthari corrected. The humans had taken their mining equipment, their construction, tools, even their cooking implements, and turned them into weapons. Engineer One Ho had rigged mining charges to detonate when we entered. Maintenance Chief Sangwoo had converted atmospheric processes into projectile launchers. Every piece of civilian equipment had become a tool of war. The bar had grown completely quiet now. Even the serving staff had stopped their work to listen to the old warrior's tale. The first explosion killed 12 of our best soldiers instantly. Velthari said, his voice flat with remembered shock. Then the humans began their attack. They moved through the station's corridors like they had been born there, using maintenance shafts and ventilation systems to appear where we least expected them. He gestured with two of his arms, recreating the layout of the station in the air. We had superior numbers, better weapons, and complete tactical information about the facility. But the humans knew every pipe, every wire, every hidden passage. They had lived there for years, and they used that knowledge like a weapon. How long did the battle last? Asked the Ishkari. 18 hours, Velthari replied. 18 hours of fighting 300 humans who refused to accept defeat every time we thought we had them cornered. They would disappear into the walls like ghosts. Every time we secured an area, they would attack from a direction we thought was impossible. The old commander's voice grew quieter as he continued. I remember chasing a human technician named Dongmin through the hydroponic gardens. He was wounded, bleeding, carrying only a simple repair tool as a weapon any rational being would have, surrendered instead. He led me into a trap he had prepared using nothing but plant nutrients and electrical cables. What happened to him? The Zephyrian asked. He died, Velthari said simply, but not before he eliminated 6 coalition soldiers and bought time for his friends to escape as he lay dying. He was still trying to protect a group of human children who were hiding in the research labs. The young soldiers sat in uncomfortable silence, processing this information in their cultures. Individual sacrifice for the group was honored. But the scale of human determination was beyond their understanding. The worst part was their communication system. Velthari continued. They had no advanced technology, no quantum entanglement networks. They used simple radio waves and hand signals, but somehow they coordinated their defense perfectly. When Captain Union died defending the command center, Lieutenant Jinne immediately took command. When Jinne fell, Sergeant Kyang-soo stepped up. The chain of command never broke. He finished his drink and set the cup down with a soft clink. By the time we finally secured Lunar Base, we had lost over 800 soldiers. The humans had lost everyone. Every single defender died rather than surrender. But in those final moments, as Captain Union lay dying in the ruins of her command center, she was still smiling. Why? Asked the Kelvari, his voice barely above. A whisper, Velthari's compound eyes focused on the young soldier. Because she had sent one final message to Earth, a warning that the coalition was coming, along with detailed information about our weapons, our tactics, and our weaknesses. She died knowing that her sacrifice would help her species prepare for the war to come. The old commander stood slowly, his joints creaking with age. That was when we realized we were not fighting for territory or resources. We were fighting an entire species that would rather die than ill. The young soldiers round Velthari's table had grown silent, their drinks forgotten as they listened to his words. The old commander's scarred Karapochi caught the dim light as he leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. After Lunar Base, High Command thought they understood the problem. He said slowly, the humans had used their knowledge of the station against us. Simple solution. Fight them in open space where they had no advantages. Admiral Zethamer assembled the largest fleet in coalition history for the Battle of Europa. A young Kelvari soldier with thick grey fur asked, how many ships? 300 coalition vessels against 60 human ships. Velthari replied. Our computers predicted total victory within 2 hours. The humans had no chance of winning. Direct fleet engagement. Every tactical simulation showed the same result. Complete human defeat. He paused, taking a slow breath. The humans knew this too. So they did something that broke every rule of space warfare. Instead of forming battle lines or trying to match our formations, They split into small groups and scattered across the entire system. The Zephyrian female tilted her head in confusion. But that makes no sense. Scattered forces are weak forces. Any military academy teaches that basic principle. That is what we thought. Velthari said. Admiral Zethema ordered our fleet to split up and hunt down the human groups one by one. It should have been simple. Our ships were faster, better armed, and more heavily armored. Each coalition vessel could easily destroy 3 human ships. The old warrior's mandibles clicked together nervously, but the humans were not trying to win her. Traditional battle. Captain Tyun's group led our northern fleet into the asteroid belt near Europa. Commander Sujin's ships disappeared into the radiation storms round Jupiter. Lieutenant Jinho's squadron dove so close to the sun that our sensors could barely track them. They were running away, asked Theoshkari. No, Velthari said firmly. They were preparing. For 3 days, our fleets chased them through the solar system. Every time we got close to one human group, they would vanish into some dangerous area where our ships could not follow safely. Our pilots grew frustrated. Our formations became stretched out. And our supply lines got longer and longer. The bar round them had grown completely quiet. Even the alien bartender had stopped cleaning glasses to listen to the story. Then on the 4th day, everything changed. Velthari continued. The scattered human group suddenly came together again, but not where we expected. They appeared behind our main supply convoy, the one carrying fuel and ammunition for our entire fleet. He gestured with his forearms, showing the tactical situation in any normal battle. Attacking a supply convoy is a minor annoyance. You lose some equipment, request new supplies, and continue fighting. But the humans had studied our logistics for days. They knew exactly which ships carried what materials. What did they do? The Kelvari asked. Captain Minjan's ship rammed our main fuel carrier. Velthari said. While it was exploding, Lieutenant Hygin's group destroyed our ammunition transport. Engineer Boyang used some kind of computer virus to shut down our repair ships. In 20 minutes, they crippled our entire fleet's ability to continue fighting. The young soldiers looked at each other with growing unease. This was not how civilized warfare was supposed to work. But the worst part was how they coordinated their attacks, Velthari said. His voice filled with old fear. They had no quantum communication systems, no advanced battle computers. They were using simple radio signals that we could easily intercept and decode. Yet somehow, they moved like a single organism. He leaned back in his chair, his compound eyes reflecting painful memories. I watched from the bridge of the Eternal Victory as human pilot Jamin flew his damaged fighter. Directly at our command. Shep, his engines were failing, his weapons were destroyed, and he was losing atmosphere. Any sane being would have ejected and hoped for rescue. Did he surrender? Asked the Zephyrian. He accelerated, Velthari said simply, as his ship broke. Apart on him, he was transmitting coordinates to his fellow humans. Not a call for help, not a goodbye message, tactical information about our defensive weaknesses. He died giving his friends the knowledge they needed to hurt us more. The old commander's voice grew quieter. That was when I began to understand what we were really fighting. These humans did not think like individuals. When one of them learned something useful, they all knew it instantly. When one of them died, the others became more dangerous, not less. How is that possible without technology? Asked Theoshkari. Velthari's mandibles clicked slowly. They called it trust, complete. Absolute trust in each other. Sergeant Eugene would charge into plasma fire because he knew Corporal Eugene would cover him. Pilot Sunyang would fly through an asteroid field because she trusted Navigator Donghyun's calculations completely. They did not need computers to coordinate. They had something much more powerful. He stood up slowly, his old joints protesting. By the end of the Battle of Europa, we had technically won. The human fleet was destroyed, their ships scattered, as debris across the system. But we had lost so many vessels that Admiral Zethamar ordered a full retreat. The young soldiers stared at him in confusion. You won, but retreated. We realized that fighting humans was like fighting a disease. Velthari said, every battle made them stronger. Every defeat taught them something new. They learned from their mistakes faster than we could adapt to their changes, the dead ones. Passed their knowledge to the living ones, and the living ones used that knowledge to kill more of us. He looked down at their shocked faces. That was when High Command began to understand the truth. We were not fighting an army. We were fighting an entire species that treated warfare like education. Velthari Esfahan's gripped his empty cup so tightly that small cracks appeared in the metal. The young soldiers round him had stopped asking questions, sensing that. The old warrior was approaching the darkest part of his story. The orange lights of the bar seemed dimmer now, casting deeper shadows across his scarred face. The siege of New Bizen changed everything. He said, his voice barely loud enough to hear. It was supposed to be our final victory. The humans had retreated to their colony in Kepler-4 to be. A small world with only one major city. We surrounded the planet with 200 ships and cut off all supply routes. The Zephyrian leaned forward. How many humans were trapped there? 50,000 civilians and maybe 5,000 soldiers. Velthari replied. Commander Jong-Su was in charge of their defense. Intelligence reports said he was young for a human leader. Only 32 years old. The coalition had him completely. Outnumbered and outgunned. Any reasonable species would have surrendered within days. He paused, staring into his cracked cup as if he could see the past reflected there. General Murdoch gave them 1 week to consider surrender terms. The humans asked for 2 weeks. When that time ended, they asked for 1 more week, we thought. They were stalling, hoping for rescue that would never come. The young Calvaries bristled with anticipation. But they were planning something. They were saying goodbye. Velthari said simply. Every human in that city was recording messages to their families on other worlds, parents, telling their children to be strong, children promising to remember their grandparents' stories, soldiers writing letters they knew would never be delivered. The old commander's mandibles clicked together rapidly, a sign of deep distress in his species. On the final day of negotiations, something strange happened. The entire city began to sing. Not just the soldiers, but everyone, old people, children, shopkeepers, teachers, mechanics. 55,000 human voices singing the same song. What were they singing? Asked the Ishkari. Our translation computers identified it as an ancient human war song. Velthari replied. Something about protecting their homeland and never surrendering to invaders. But the strange thing was how calm they sounded. Our psychological warfare specialists analyzed the audio patterns and reported something. Impossible, the humans. Stress levels were decreasing as they sang. He looked up at the young faces round him, seeing his own confusion reflected in their eyes. We had surrounded them, cut off their food supplies, and threatened to destroy their city. They should have been terrified. Instead, they were becoming more peaceful, more focused, more determined. The bar had grown completely silent now. Even the background noise of the space station seemed muted, as if the universe itself was listening to the old warrior's tale. That night, Commander Jong-Su sent a message to General Murdoch. Velthari continued. It was very simple. He said that the people of New Bizen had voted, and they chose to fight rather than surrender. He thanked the general for his patience and warned him that the battle would begin at dawn. warned him. The Zephyr asked. The humans always did that. Velthari said. They would tell us exactly when and where they planned to attack. It should have been a tactical disaster for them. But somehow it made everything worse for us, knowing that death was coming, but not knowing how they would deliver it. He stood up slowly, his old body creaking with the movement. I was commanding the eastern perimeter when the attack began. 2,000 human soldiers came out of the city at sunrise, walking in perfect formation across the open ground between us. No vehicles, no heavy weapons, just humans with their simple projectile rifles. The young soldiers exchanged worried glances. This was not how modern warfare was supposed to work. They were singing again, Velthari said, his voice dropping too. A whisper, the same war song from the night before, but now it sounded different. Not peaceful, but terrible, like the sound of an approaching storm or an avalanche about to fall. He began pacing behind his chair, his forearms gesturing as he relived the memory. Our plasma cannons opened fire when they were still 2 kilometers away. The humans kept walking. Our automatic defenses activated when they reached 1 kilometer. The humans kept walking. When they were 500 meters away, I could see their faces. "What did you see?" asked the Kelvari, his voice barely audible. "They were smiling," Velthari said. Every single human soldier was smiling as they walked through plasma fire that was killing their friends. Private Kyunho stepped over the body of his fallen comrade and kept advancing. Sergeant Haijin helped a wounded soldier to his feet, and they continued forward together. Captain Minjun was hit 3 times but refused to fall down. The old commander stopped pacing and gripped the back of his chair. When they reached our defensive line, everything changed. The humans stopped being an army and became something else, something primal and terrifying that our civilized minds could not understand. What happened? The Ashkari whispered. They started screaming. Velthari said. Not cries of pain or fear, but something much older and more frightening. Battle cries that came from the deepest part of their genetic memory, and they fought. Like creatures possessed by madness, he sat down heavily, his scarred karapochi reflecting the dim lights. I watched Private Taeyong eliminate an entire squad of coalition Marines with nothing but a damaged rifle and pure fury. Corporal Sunyang continued fighting even after losing an arm. They seemed to feel no pain, no fear, no doubt. The young soldiers sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had heard. That night, Velthai concluded, 5,000 coalition soldiers fled from 2,000 humans. We had better weapons, better armor, and superior numbers. But something in their eyes convinced us that death was not their enemy. It was their closest friend. The silence in the cantina stretched on as Velthari slowly lowered himself back into his chair. His compound eyes swept across the young faces gathered round him, noting how their expressions had changed from eager curiosity to something approaching horror. The orange lights seemed dimmer now, casting long shadows that danced across the metal walls. The retreat from New Bizen was not the end. He said quietly, "It was the beginning of our real education about humanity. High Command refused to accept that a primitive species could defeat the Coalition's finest forces. They sent more ships, better weapons, newer tactics. A young Ashkari soldier with purple scales shifted uncomfortably. Surely the humans could not resist forever. Velthari's mandibles clicked slowly. That was our mistake. Thinking in terms of resistance, the humans were not trying to resist us. They were trying to teach us a lesson. Though we were too proud to learn it at first, he reached for his drink, realized it was empty, and continued without refilling it. Admiral Exoni led the next assault with 300 ships and 50,000 troops. The target was Mars, humanity's second most important world. Intelligence reported that the planet was defended by only 12,000 human soldiers. Better odds, observed the Kelvari. Worse results. Velthari replied grimly. The humans had learned from every previous battle. Colonel Yunji had studied recordings of our tactics from Lunabase. Europa and knew Bizon. She knew exactly how we would attack, what formations we would use, and where we would expect to find weakness. The old warrior's voice grew distant as he remembered. The humans no longer waited for us to come to them. They met our landing forces in space, using converted mining ships and civilian transports as weapons. Captain Wansik flew his cargo, hauled directly into our command cruiser. Engineer Yuna used her construction mech to tear apart a coalition battle tank with her bare mechanical hands. But they still lost, didn't they? Asked the Zephyrian. Civilian ships against military vessels. Velthari was quiet for a long moment. Define lost. Yes, the humans were defeated. Yes, we occupied Mars, but it cost us 47 ships and 23,000 soldiers to conquer a world defended by 12,000 humans. The mathematics were becoming impossible. He looked round the table, meeting each young soldier's eyes. High Command began to realize something terrible. Every human we killed was replaced by 3 more who fought with the fury of the bereaved. Every victory cost us more than we could afford to lose. The cantina's other patrons had drifted closer, drawn by the old veteran story despite themselves. Aliens from dozens of species listened in fascination and growing unease. The war lasted 3 more years. Velthari continued 3 years, of victories that felt like defeats. We conquered human colonies, destroyed their fleets, and occupied their worlds. But the humans kept fighting with weapons they built from scrap metal and determination they seemed to pull from thin air. What ended it? Asked the Kelvari. Economics, Velthari said simply. The coalition was spending more resources fighting humans than we gained from conquering their territories. General Kethma calculated that completely defeating humanity would require every ship in the coalition fleet and would take approximately 50 years. He paused, letting that information sink in. 50 years to defeat a species that had been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. The Council of Worlds voted to negotiate a peace treaty rather than commit galactic suicide. Young recruit from a species Velthari did not recognize raised a tentacle. So the humans won. Nobody won, Velthari replied. The humans kept their independence and their colonies. The coalition agreed to leave them alone. But both sides lost so much that victory became meaningless. The old commander stood slowly, his joints protesting after sitting for so long. I was part of the negotiation team that met with the human representatives. I expected to find broken warriors, people traumatized by years of terrible warfare. Were they? Asked the Ishkari. They were gardening, Velthari said, his voice filled with remembered bewilderment. Ambassador Jinwu was growing flowers in the station's hydroponics bay. General Sujen was teaching alien children how to play human games. They treated former enemies like old friends who had simply disagreed about something unimportant. The young soldiers exchanged confused glances. This was not how warriors were supposed to behave after such a brutal conflict. I asked Ambassador Jinwu how humans could be so peaceful after fighting so fiercely. Velthari continued. She said something I will never forget. She said that humans only fight when they have to, but when they must fight, they fight with everything they have. The war was over. So now they could return to being gardeners and teachers and friends. He moved toward the cantina's exit, his scarred karapochi catching the light one final time. The humans are expanding across the galaxy now, establishing colonies and trading posts on hundreds of worlds. Most species welcome them as neighbors and partners, and the others called out the Zephyrian. Velthari paused at the doorway, his compound eyes reflecting the orange lights one last time. The wise ones remember the war and treat humans with respect. The foolish ones think they can succeed where the coalition failed. His voice carried across the nascent cantina. I have spent 20 years studying humanity, trying to understand what makes them so dangerous. I finally learned the truth. Humans are not warriors by nature. They are protectors. They will endure any suffering, face any odds, and sacrifice everything they have to defend what they love. The old veteran's final words echoed in the sudden quiet. Never threaten what a human calls family. Never assume they have reached their limits, and never, ever underestimate what they will do when they have nothing left to lose. The cantina door hissed shut behind him, leaving the young soldiers to contemplate a galaxy where the most dangerous predators sang lullabies and called strangers their brothers.